You know, we live in a time where kindness is often treated like something people pick up when the cameras are on, when the audience is watching, or when there's social credit to gain. And that's precisely the problem. We've confused acting kind with being kind, but they're not the same thing. One is superficial, the other is foundational. One lives on the surface of behavior. The other springs from the depths of who you are. You know, real kindness, the kind that actually matters, doesn't come from social expectation or a sense of duty. It doesn't bloom because you read a motivational quote or because it's the right thing to do. It's a reflection of your inner architecture, the values you've built, the pain you've endured, the love you've chosen to carry, even when the world gave you every reason to hate. It is, in essence, your soul showing itself in action. People often ask, how can I be more kind? But that's the wrong question. The better one is, who am I when no one's watching? When there's nothing to gain, when there's no applause, when the spotlight's gone, what do I offer the world then? Because that is who you really are. Not what you do under pressure to perform, but what you naturally express when ego steps out of the way. You know, this is where it gets uncomfortable, because if we're honest, many of us don't like the answer. We find that our kindness is conditional, given only when we feel good, when others deserve it, or when we're treated well first. But conditional kindness is just disguised transaction. It's generosity only when it's easy. And that's not strength. That's self-protection. To be truly kind, you have to be vulnerable. You have to drop the armor. You have to risk being misunderstood, taken advantage of, or unappreciated. That's why real kindness is rare. It requires maturity, not just manners. It's forged in the fire of self-awareness. You have to confront the darker parts of yourself. The envy, the pride, the bitterness. You have to recognize the reflex to judge, to retaliate, to control. And then deliberately, you choose to respond with grace instead. And this isn't about being a doormat. Don't confuse kindness with passivity. I'm not saying tolerate abuse or allow yourself to be used. Quite the opposite. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is set a boundary, walk away, or say no, because kindness without truth isn't love. It's fear wearing a mask. Authentic kindness tells the truth. It confronts when needed. It protects even if it's unpopular, because it's not about comfort, it's about care. You know, so how do you develop that kind of kindness? You start by examining your motives. Are you doing this to be liked, or because it aligns with your character? Are you choosing kindness because it's who you are, or because it's what you're supposed to do? You have to dig deep, ask hard questions, reflect honestly, and then commit not just to kind acts, but to becoming a kind person. You know, because kindness is not something you tack on to your personality. It's not a patch you wear. It's a quality you embody, and it only becomes permanent when you become the kind of person for whom kindness is the natural outflow. That takes time, it takes work, but it also takes pain. Because some of the kindest people in the world didn't get that way because life was easy. They got there because life broke them, and they rebuilt with softness instead of hardness. They didn't let pain make them bitter, they let it make them deeper. They understood that suffering doesn't have to destroy you, it can sculpt you if you let it. You know, and that's the real test. When life hits you, when people betray you, when the world ignores your goodness, what do you choose then? Do you close off, or do you open wider? Do you let life harden you, or do you stand firm in who you are? You know, kindness isn't the absence of pain, it's the wisdom that grows from it. And that's why it's so powerful, because when someone who's been through hell still chooses to be kind, that's not weakness. That's mastery. That's soul. So don't aim to appear kind, aim to become kind. Do the inner work. Heal your wounds. Challenge your ego so that when you act, you're not performing, you're reflecting something real, something solid, something, because when kindness comes from the soul, not only does it transform how you treat others, it transforms how you experience the world. You stop seeing people as threats, you start seeing them as humans, you stop seeking power over others, you start seeking peace within yourself. And from that place, everything changes. Let me leave you with this. If the world never claps for you, if no one ever notices your kindness, would you still be kind? If the answer is yes, then congratulations, you've stopped acting and you've started becoming, that's the kind of soul this world needs more of, not louder people, just deeper ones. There's a fascinating paradox about kindness. The more genuine it is, the more invisible it often becomes. That's because true kindness isn't loud. It doesn't demand credit. It doesn't broadcast itself. It operates in silence, in nuance, in those small, almost imperceptible moments when you choose to respond with understanding instead of judgment, to offer grace instead of vengeance. And here's the uncomfortable part. You only get good at that kind of kindness after being given plenty of reasons not to be. What makes this kind of soul-level kindness so rare is that it isn't built during peace. It's forged in the middle of chaos, when your expectations are crushed, when someone betrays you, when life throws you into a situation where retaliation would feel justified. In those moments, you face a choice to let your pain mutate into cruelty or to metabolize that pain into wisdom and still choose to be kind. That's not sentimentality, that's strength under restraint, it's control over the ego. And it demands more from you than most people are willing to give. Why? Because kindness at its core requires courage, real courage. Not the kind that shows up once in a while when people are watching, but the quiet, consistent, inner bravery that says, I will not let this world change who I am, even when it wounds me. That kind of decision has a cost. You might feel unseen. You might feel like the only one in the room who chooses integrity over impression. But that's exactly when your character is being shaped. In a world obsessed with performance, we tend to celebrate dominance, power, being right, winning. But we underestimate the kind of force it takes to not give someone back what they gave you. The strength it takes to sit with your anger and not project it. The patience it takes to wait until you understand before you speak. Kindness isn't passive, it's intensely active. It requires energy, awareness, and emotional discipline. And it starts with one hard truth. You can't give what you haven't cultivated. You cannot offer peace if your inner world is at war. You can't show compassion if you haven't confronted your own shadows. You can't extend forgiveness if you haven't learned to deal with your own failures. This is where the depth of your kindness is formed, not in your public actions, but in your private reconciliations. The way you talk to yourself after a mistake, the way you grieve your regrets without turning them into bitterness, the way you decide every single day not to harden your heart even when you have every reason to. Think about that for a moment. The world doesn't need more people who are just nice on the surface. It needs more people who are kind at the sides cord, and to get there, you have to go through the hard work of transforming your pain into purpose. That's not a quick fix, it's a lifelong process. And it's deeply personal because no one can walk that path for you. You have to choose it. Every time you're disappointed, every time you're insulted, every time you're left out or misunderstood. And here's another angle we often miss. Kindness doesn't just shape others, it transforms you. When you choose to extend kindness even in hard moments, you're not only acting out of maturity, you're also shaping your own identity. You're reinforcing the kind of person you believe yourself to be. And that's where real power lies. Not in dominance, but in consistency. Not in applause, but in integrity. Now, it's important to admit something here. You will not always get it right. You will fail at kindness. You will snap, you'll lash out, you'll judge, because you're human. This isn't about moral perfection, it's about realignment. When you fall out of alignment with the kind of person you want to be, you notice it and you return. That's the discipline of kindness. It's not one heroic act, it's thousands of micro acts. A practice of returning again and again. We've made the mistake of treating kindness as a trait, something you either have or don't. But that's nonsense. It's a skill, one that can be strengthened or neglected. It grows with self-awareness, reflection, humility, and perhaps most of all, it grows with experience, especially painful ones. Because when life breaks you down, you finally understand the value of someone who chooses to build others up. And that understanding, once rooted deep enough, changes the way you carry yourself in the world. So if you want to live differently, more meaningfully, start here. Be the person who heals, not the one who harms. Be the person who pauses, reflects, and chooses grace. Not because it's easy, but because it's who you are. Why? Let me leave you with this thought. What if your most defining strength isn't how hard you hit back, but how quietly and consistently you choose to be kind, especially when the world gives you every excuse not to? Because when you master that, you don't just change the way others experience you.